Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome into another edition of Rath's Learning Curve. This morning, we've got Week 3 college fantasy football for FanDuel and DraftKings, the early slate. We're going to break down every single game from a Vegas projection perspective. We're going to look at the matchups, and then we're going to decide who the players are that we're going to take, and we'll go over some of those matchups as well. Before we get into the video, just as a reminder, please go to rotocurve.com and sign up for a free account and enjoy all of our free DFS content. Any sport that you want, any site that you want, for the most part, we have coverage and content that is absolutely free, and you'd be crazy not to join up. So again, go to rotocurve.com, sign up for a free account, look at our forums, our videos, our chat room. Again, you'll agree that it's the best deal on the internet because for daily fantasy sports advice, because once again, it's free and the content that you're getting is top notch and absolutely could be a premium product. So just be aware, some of the minds that we have at rotocurve.com, myself, Jake Brown, Benny Ricciardi, Josh Kalachi, all super minds in the industry, giving you the best advice and insight if you're a new player, if you haven't started a sport yet, or if you're a guy that's just grinding it out. Again, this is the site for you. So as we get into week 3 for college fantasy football, we're going to go ahead and do a screen share like we always do. So let's fire it up. Okay, guys, like we do, we go ahead and have all the matchups on the screen. I have the favorite, the underdog, the line, the total, what the projecteds are for each one, what time, what slate, and then we go with the differentials. And there were some questions on where these differentials are coming from. I'm still using the Phil Steele projections, and what I'm doing is I'm taking the team's offensive rushing rank and subtracting it from the defensive rushing rank that Phil Steele has projected going into the season. Once we move into October, we'll start to blend some of the in-season results, but for right now, it's still a little bit too early for that. One of the things that we do take into consideration is injuries and price and matchup. So again, it's not something that's an absolute. It's something that's more of a guideline that we want to look at and exploit matchups and look for opportunity. So let's get into it. A lot of big lines. Now, what we've got here is a lot of big lines this week. You see Oregon, Georgia State, 43.5. You got some in the 30s, 26s, and then we got some down low. What I've done is looked at some of the teams with favorable matchups, put them in green. The favorites are in green. The games itself are in green if those are the ones that we want to target. So we'll go down here as well. What we're looking for is it a low line with a very high total? So you've got like the two games that really stick out are Indiana, Western Kentucky, where the line is only 2 and a total of 71.5. We want games that are going to be high scoring, close, back and forth, where there's just going to be a lot of offense. And then also Memphis, Bowling Green is 3.5 at 79. So you see a monster. Now, we're not the only ones that know this. There's going to be a lot of people on these games. However, with teams like Indiana, Western Kentucky, Memphis, and Bowling Green. Now, Memphis Bowling Green is a DraftKings only play, just be aware. We don't have that here. And then Cincinnati, Miami, Ohio is FanDuel only and not on DraftKings. So, look, a lot of people are going to be on these games, but we want to at least give you the options of knowing, look, there's a lot of options in these games. They aren't big name known teams, so to speak, like Michigan State, so there's still a lot of soft competition out there. So if you're looking at cash games, I think a lot of these players probably could be lower owned. Now we don't really care about ownership as much in cash games, but what I'm getting at is I think there's an opportunity for you to build some really solid cash lineups to get value. We're not necessarily worried about player ownership. We're worried about value. And there's going to be huge value on Indiana, Western Kentucky, Memphis, and Bowling Green, where the upside is so huge that I think you're going to be able to take an opportunity. So for me, I think I've noticed this early on this season. I will tell you this. You are crazy if you are not playing 50-50 in college football right now. I don't know about anybody else, but what I'm seeing is there's some very soft lineups out there. There's some very strange lineups. There's players that are suspended. There's players that are not starting. There's players that are overpriced. I'm seeing a lot of opportunity in 50-50s I'm not recommending that you play heads ups unless you're an experienced player and you know who you're going against. But I'm telling you right now, 50-50s in college football, there is absolutely an opportunity for you to crush it right now. And I think if you use the information that we give you here on rotocurve.com, you're going to be able to do that. We're hearing week in, week out so far this college season, guys winning tournaments and guys absolutely killing it in 50-50s, every single week. So using this information, you're going to have a leg up on the competition. There's some big, big games here. Look, Oregon, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Texas A&M, Michigan, Michigan State, all marquee teams with huge favorites. You're not going to see a lot of players recommended from these games because we're worried about the blowout factor, and that's not necessarily where the value is going to be. So, we're not playing Vernon Adams, we're not playing Cardell Jones, we're not playing Kyle Allen. There's going to be other people that are going to recommend those guys, and that's fine. It's just not what I do. I really look for the best matchups and the best value, and we try to keep a tight list of players that we give you every week. Not, some of these games are at the bottom, like Virginia Tech, Purdue, and LSU, and Georgia Tech, things like that. Not a lot of opportunity there. Now, here's the thing, though. You don't want to just dismiss low total games. If you've got lower total games, but you've got lower point spreads, like we've got Miami, Nebraska 3, Georgia Tech, Notre Dame 2.5, LSU, Auburn 17. These are opportunities where you're going to look at the run game. Now, in the run game, we've got an opportunity possibly. Georgia Tech splits up their run game so much it's really hard. You got maybe an advantage for LSU. UMass doesn't really have a run. That's a pass. It's one of those things where if there's opportunity in the run game with a lower total game that's close, we're going to look at that, and you'll notice that I will have some players in those kinds of matchups. Oregon, Georgia State, 43.5, 72 total. Look, this game is an absolute massacre. Oregon distributes the ball around so much that you can't really touch the pass and the run. Really, the only play for me, Oregon, on a weekly basis is the quarterback. And in this spot, the quarterback who's dealing with somewhat of an injury might be out of the game pretty quick. So for me, there's really nothing here. We are going to talk about a play in Georgia State that's strictly a tournament play, and I'm going to talk about that, is the wide receiver from Georgia State for me because of the price and because they throw so much and they're going to be behind. I think that there's going to be an opportunity. We did see this early on this year where some of these these number one wide receivers in these games where they're projected to be blowouts, where there's cheap wide receivers out there and they get a lot of volume, there is going to be opportunity. So the wide receiver from Georgia State, we're going to be looking at Oklahoma, Tulsa. Now, normally, I love playing on Tulsa. However, in this spot, it could be dangerous. 31 line. Now, that line does seem pretty high. However, Tulsa's got no defense, and I think that Oklahoma's defense could be, this game could absolutely be a 48-20 type game, and I think Evans could struggle. That's why I'm also not necessarily on Kevon Lucas, except for one instance, and we'll talk about that. So Oklahoma's passing game is something that we're going to want to look at here. Again, we are a little bit afraid of the blowout factor, but because Tulsa's got such a prolific offense right now, I think, and Oklahoma is coming off the game last week, I think Oklahoma is going to want to put up some points. So that's going to be a situation where I'm not as afraid of the blowout factor. Ohio State, Northern Illinois, I'm not going anywhere near this game. The line is 34.5. They're going to play so many guys in this game that I don't want to touch it. There is a potential for Northern Illinois that I looked at, a wide receiver, but I got off it. Again, I just don't want any part of this game. Texas A&M, Nevada. Probably going to want a little bit of the Texas A&M passing game, but again, with a 34 line and a projected total of 64, this game is looking at 49-15. The thing I'm worried about with Texas A&M is that they're going to spread the ball around so much that we're not going to be able to lock in on anybody. So again, not something that I'm overly excited about. Michigan, UNLV, 34 is the line, 49.5. This is nuts. Basically, it's a 42-7 type of projected game. I don't like this blowout factor. However, the running back from Michigan is in a nice spot, and he's very attractively priced. I think he's going to get workload in the spot, and then they'll go ahead and give it up to the reserves. There could be a potential to use Devontae Boyd for UNLV in a GPP. But again, I think he's probably going to be only on FanDuel. They're going to be behind. They're going to have to throw, and he could get volume. But again, it's only a tournament play. Michigan State Air Force, the line is 26, total 55. So looking at 40 to 15-ish. Advantage on Michigan State here on rush and pass. Here's the thing that I worry about in this game. Michigan State is coming off of a huge win against Oregon. And if they get up early in this game and they get up big, I think that they're going to pull some of their guys. And that's one of the concerns that I have. So I'm not really on Michigan State. Indiana, Western Kentucky is a game I talked about. I'm absolutely on this game. I'm all over this game. We'll go over these players. So this is, you absolutely are going to want players from this game. North Carolina, Illinois. I didn't highlight that in green, but we absolutely want North Carolina in green there. Look, we get North Carolina as a 9 favorite with a 63.5, which is nice, 36 total. Huge edge in the rush game. Now, here's the thing about North Carolina. Marquise Wilson, the quarterback, runs a lot. So I'm actually looking more at the quarterback here. Don't mind Hood in this game, but I'm looking more at the quarterback from North Carolina. They spread the ball around so much on offense that it's really hard to lock in on any receivers. I think you can take some receivers if you're going to pair Williams in a tournament with some of the receivers, but that would be the only spot. Temple, UMass. Normally, we love to play on the UMass pass game. However, this is a very tough spot. They're only projected at 22, and Temple's got a pretty good run game that could really give them fits. I love the Temple running back in this spot, even though they do have a negative differential. The Temple's running back is very good. I think they're going to want to play keep away. Don't mind the UMass wide receiver Sharp. We'll talk about him just because he gets so much volume on that team that you almost have to look at him. Here's a game where I love the running game. Miami, Nebraska. You're getting great value on both starting running backs due to injuries and situations like that. Low total of 3, 57.5 is not bad, 30-27. The matchups don't show anything, but here's the thing. The way that the game script is going to play out, these are teams that are still going to rely on the run here, and I do like both running backs in this spot. Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, nothing really stands out for me in this game. I'm not, with the new quarterback at Notre Dame, that's got me a little bit worried. I don't necessarily know how he's going to play. I can't see using a quarterback for Notre Dame in a GPP as a high-risk flyer. I think you almost have to pair him with Fuller if you're going to do that. But, again, that's a high-risk play for me and isn't really something that I'm recommending this week. LSU, Auburn. This is going to be a grind-out, low-scoring game. LSU is favored by 7. I think that number is a little high. I think this game is going to be very closely played. It's going to be a defensive battle, and I think the run game is going to be heavy. So what I'm looking at here is both running backs, LSU and Auburn. I'm going to be looking at these guys, especially in cash games. Now, the differentials aren't really there on the matchup side, but again, the way the game script is going to play out, the way that I'm looking at this game is I look at it for being more of like a 23-20 type game, and they're going to run the ball. Both teams are going to want to run the ball quite a bit. Quarterback situation on both teams is very scary, and you're going to be looking at run. Virginia Tech, Purdue, I don't like anything in this game. It's very hard to take anybody from Virginia Tech, especially with a new quarterback. They just don't score. They rely on defense. So I'm fading that game. Duke Northwestern, for the most part, this is a game that we're not going to have anybody on except for the quarterback from Duke, who has a very attractive price still, and he runs the ball quite a bit, and he had a great first opening game that we recommended him to play. So love the quarterback from Duke this week. We'll talk about him. This is the other marquee game you're going to we'll lock in on. It is a DraftKings only game. Memphis, Bowling Green, line of 3.5, total of 79. This line is jumped. Don't be surprised if it continues to get into the 80s. We love everybody from this game. Cincinnati, Miami of Ohio. I think you got to like the Cincinnati side here. Here's the thing. Smaller schools like Cincinnati aren't necessarily going to pull their guys as much as a team like Michigan, Oregon, Oklahoma. So you got to love the matchups here. Passing, oh, my God, look at this, a 103 differential. Cincinnati's going to throw. They're going to throw often. They're going to get up big. So you got to love that passing game. Let's get over to the picks. Let's get over to quarterbacks. I'm going to give you the prices on FanDuel, DraftKings. If they're not listed, either they're not on the site or it's not a recommended play for that site because the price was too high. Matt Johnson, Bowling Green, 8,700 at DraftKings. I think you have to lock him in. Marquise Wilson, North Carolina. I didn't have him on DraftKings, but I do have him on FanDuel. He's a little bit cheaper over there. Baker Mayfield, you can use him. Oklahoma, you can use him on both sites. He's at 9,000 on FanDuel, 9,300 on DraftKings. Gunnar Kiel is a FanDuel-only play at 8,200. He could be the best value play of the day at quarterback. Remember, we talked about Dane Evans week 1, who came through in a big way. I think Gunnar Kiel at 8,200 for me is a guy that I'm going to have a lot of exposure to with this matchup. Paxton Lynch in that Memphis game against Bowling Green, he's DraftKings only at 8,900. Might be a guy that's lower owned. Maybe people are not on Memphis as much. They're going to be more on Bowling Green because they saw what Bowling Green did to Tennessee. Thomas Sirk, 6,600 on both sites. Absolute must play, especially if you're going to go with Matt Johnson or Baker Mayfield or Marquise Wilson and you're going to pay up at quarterback. I think Sirk is the perfect guy that you can get in there as a value play. And then the other guy who could be a little bit underowned, even though the game is highly targeted, Nate Sudfeld at 8,300 could be in line for a really big game. And it might be a little bit lower on than what people think. At the running back position, talked about Jihad Thomas from Temple at 7,700 on FanDuel. Talked about how much I love him in this spot with Temple trying to play keep away from UMass. Have to absolutely love Thomas in the spot at 7,700. Definitely one of my top running backs this week. Jordan Howard from Indiana has been a stud. We talked about him in the sleeper picks video. We've talked about him every week. Love him more on FanDuel at 8,300. Leonard Fournette, we talked about LSU Auburn. I think you get him at a steal here at 8,400 on FanDuel, so he's absolutely in play on FanDuel for me. The running back prices are better on FanDuel at the top for me this week. Devion Smith from Michigan, like him on FanDuel at 7,700. Do also like him on DraftKings at 7,400. Terrell Newby, we talked about that Miami-Nebraska game. You get him at a steal of a price on DraftKings at 6,600. Joseph Yearby, you get him at absolute highway robbery at Miami. On FanDuel at 6,800. He's an absolute must play for me. With the injuries to the Miami backfield, he gets in there and you get him at a steal of a price. Peyton Barber, Auburn, he's absolutely a must play on DraftKings at 4,800, starting running back. And that game to me is going to be a lot of run on both sides. This guy right here could be the best value play of the week at running back. DeAndre Furby at Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky's #1 running back is out for the year. Their #2 running back is probably not going to go this week. This guy is going to be heavily owned, so he's a cash game play for me. He's going to be probably one of the most highest owned running backs in tournaments. So it's just not somebody I'm going to have a little bit of exposure because it's really hard to get away from the value. But just be aware that a lot of people are going to be on this guy. But he is a cash game lock for me. Along with Yearby is probably the other guy that you can get in there as well. Jarvis Cooper from Memphis, 5,700 on DraftKings. We want a piece of this Memphis Bowling Green. Now, Bowling Green, Fred Coppett at 4,800. The thing about Bowling Green is that they're #1. They kind of split their running back, so we're going with the cheaper guy here in the high-scoring game. I do like Coppett a little bit more. So at 4,800, he makes a great flex option. You can get Barber and Coppett at 4,800 in a cash game at your flexes, and that's really going to open up a lot of opportunity. Let's go wide receivers. I do have more wide receivers than normal because of some of the higher scoring games. We'll talk about these guys. Roger Lewis, Bowling Green, #1 wide receiver on Bowling Green, 7,300 on DraftKings. You get great value there. Sterling Shepard from Oklahoma, their #1 wide receiver. Better value on FanDuel at 7,700, and probably better value if you're pairing with Mayfield, which you're getting a good price over there as well. I still like him in this spot. Just be aware of that blowout factor, but I think Shepard could get a lot of volume early on and load up. Kevon Lucas from Tulsa, normally a guy I'm going to recommend every week. I'm pumping the brakes a little bit because of the matchup, but he is an absolute steal on FanDuel at 6,800. He's normally a guy who should be in the $8,000 to $9,000 range at wide receiver. The matchup's tough. He's going to be heavily owned. I wouldn't use him in a tournament, but in cash game, I have no problem doing it because I'm not going to spend as much up on wide receiver. Tajay Sharp, to me, even though the matchup's tough, the guy is a volume hog, and at 6,700, 6,600, another guy, for cash game wide receivers, I'm looking at $6,000 to $7,000, and he's a guy I can absolutely play with Lucas and have no problem doing it. Kenny Golladay from Northern Illinois, we did talk about a potential opportunity in that game. Look, this is a tournament play only for me at 5,300 on DraftKings. They're going to be behind heavily to Ohio State. He's their #1 wide receiver, could get a lot of volume as they are going to be behind. Mosey Frazier from Memphis, their #1 wide receiver, 6,300 on DraftKings. You are going to want exposure to Memphis. To me, at that price, makes for a great cash game play. Ricky Jones from Indiana, 6,300 on FanDuel, 5,600 on DraftKings. More of a DraftKings play for me here. Again, probably going to want a piece of that Indiana game, but it falls in that line, that $6,000 to $7,000 range. So we're gonna like that. Let's drop down here. Taywan Taylor, Western Kentucky. Look, Dangerfield is still banged up. Keep an eye on what Dangerfield's health situation is. Get him at a pretty attractive price in between 6,000 and 7,000. Western Kentucky is going to be throwing the ball a ton. Another Bowling Green wide receiver, Ronnie Moore. He's priced at 6,000 on DraftKings. When you start talking about secondary wide receivers, that's where you start talking about tournaments. You start talking about stacks. So if you're going to go with Johnson from Bowling Green, you're going to want Lewis and you're going to want Moore. And you're going to want to stack Bowling Green if that's the direction you're going to want to go. Devontae Boyd from UNLV is a guy that I've definitely talked about every week. However, this is a tough matchup against Michigan. I think he's in play on FanDuel in a tournament because he's only 5,000, and it's going to free up some salary for you to pay up at other positions. So for me, I think that at 5,000, I'm willing to take a flyer, but I wasn't willing to use him on DraftKings. Antoine Grant, the other wide receiver from Western Kentucky. You get him at 5,200 on FanDuel, 4,700 on DraftKings. Again, you start talking about stacking. I didn't mention the quarterback from Western Kentucky, Doty. He's just on the cusp. He was like number 6 for me. The thing is, you always got to pay a high ticket for him. However, they're going to throw the ball more in this game. They're not going to rely on the run as much. We still like the running back because of the price, but I think you got to like the Western Kentucky pass game a lot more. So if you're going to use these wide receivers from Western Kentucky, pair them with Doughty, use Taylor, use Grant. One of the things that we potentially could look at, we'll talk about at the end, is stacking an entire game. We talked about that with Tulsa FAU a couple weeks ago, and it worked out great. I think there's going to be some opportunities to stack some of these games and tournaments and go crazy. Garrett Dieter, the third wide receiver from Bowling Green, I got him on here because he's only 3,500. Again, I think you can use him if in a Bowling Green stack, but that's really going to be the only spot that I'm going to want to use. Simi Cobbs is from Indiana. Again, if you're going to stack Indiana, Western Kentucky, I think that this is a guy you're going to want to look at. It's I really like this price on DraftKings, and especially with the 1-point PPR. Bug Howard had a really good opening week. You get him, his price really hasn't changed. You get him at bare minimum price on FanDuel. Now, North Carolina does spread the ball around a lot, but he had a big game against South Carolina, and you get him at this ridiculous price of 4,500 on FanDuel. So he's in play for me. I wouldn't even hesitate possibly to use him in cash, only because I think that they're going to put up some points, and it looks like he's going to get a touchdown. Guy that we talked about, Georgia State wide receiver Penny Hart. You get him at 4,500 on FanDuel, 3,700 on DraftKings. Here's why he's in play. Georgia State throws the ball a ton. He's a number 1 wide receiver. Even though they're only projected at 14, I still think they're going to put up more than 14. Oregon's defense is probably not going to have a lot of motivation in this game. So even if Oregon puts up 50 or 60, they're probably still going to give up 20, 24 points. Penny Hart's going to get volume, and at that price, it's absolutely insane. That's going to wrap it up for the plays this week. Now, one of the things that we're going to talk about is stacking games. And we talked about Indiana, Western Kentucky, Memphis, Bowling Green. I think you can have opportunities on DraftKings to stack these games because of the 2 quarterbacks and the double flexes. Absolutely look at ways where you can stack Indiana, Western Kentucky, Memphis, Bowling Green, and look at that in a tournament, because as far as an all-in play and upside play, these games could give you that. These games could be in the 80 or 90-point range and just give you ridiculous points. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up this morning. Hope you enjoyed the video. And again, join us over at rotocurve.com. Sign up for a free membership, and we look forward to seeing you in the chat room and the forums. Thanks again, guys.